All right, everybody, welcome to the first episode of the DSN Prospect Pod. Of course, we're already down one member of this show.
One of us didn't make it.
One of us did not make it. They put him through the ringer this weekend. That is Dalton. If you haven't seen us before, if you aren't joining us from our previous show through Around the Block, you'll meet him hopefully next week when we do our second show on this pod. But joining me is Jake. He will also hopefully be here the rest of the way through the draft. And my name is Shayne. So if you are new to not only this channel, but new to seeing us, we've been doing this for quite some time, doing some draft content, as people do. We like to consider ourselves amateur scouts, like I'm sure many of you at home are, but we do legitimately grind the tape. Now, some of you, I'm just going to tell you, you don't be doing that. I see your takes out there. You know, if you want to sound smart to your friends, though, this is a good way to do it. We will say some stuff that will ultimately be right. Now, how much of it? Only time will tell. But as great scouts will always tell you, you're never wrong. You're just too early. So that's one thing to keep in mind. So if the players we like in this episode, which it is our edge rankings and our linebacker rankings, so it's going to be a fun episode, at least for the edge rankings part. The linebacker part, I don't know. Well, it depends. Every class is a little different with that, but nowadays especially, linebacker is kind of a crapshoot, but we'll get to that in a minute. But we'll hopefully say some stuff that ends up being smart. That's always the goal, right? At least a couple of things. But in all honesty, though, regardless of that, it'll be a lot of fun. We hope that you guys enjoy this on Degenerate Sports Network. This is going to be one of two shows we do every week, and maybe more to come. We'll see if we can get some other people involved, do some other stuff. But this is our draft show, and I wanted to shout out right away. Wednesday, we're doing our first betting show on here called Over the Line, and it's going to be a March Madness episode, of course, which – what a better time to start a betting podcast than when March Madness is about to hit. So, we'll see you guys at that point as well. But, Jake, before we get into the linebacker ranks, we're going to start there. Any just overall thoughts you want to throw out about the linebacker group in general? Because I know it is one of those positions that more and more, I think, rarely has a player that just really makes you go, you know what, this guy can be great right away.
Yeah, it's an interesting position. I mentioned this before the show, but I feel like every year when I look at this position, it ends up being a little bit different than most people. So
yeah,
maybe I'll have some surprising rankings compared to some people out there. But I noticed for this and the edge rusher class, I noticed, and we'll get into the specifics, but I noticed a lot of similarities in a lot of players. So that was one thing I picked up on.
I think I kind of agree with that part. There's a couple outliers, but a lot of the guys fit similar profile. Just some of them, I think, do a better job of that.
Than when I was watching a lot of them, I feel like I had similar thoughts. But, we'll get into it.
Yeah, and we are going to get into it. So that's going to be our first position of the night. So we want to get the linebackers out of the way. Not that we don't like linebackers. If you're a linebacker out there, a young linebacker, don't quit your job. Don't quit playing the position if you like it. It's just in the NFL, especially compared to what they asked of them in college. A lot of the time, it's not going to be the exact same stuff. Like, there's a reason why a lot of linebackers that go early now are just really good athletes that they hope they can teach to play linebacker, because a lot of college teams are kind of just sticking a great athlete out there and telling them to figure it out. And sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. So it's just kind of the situation that we'll probably find ourselves with a lot of these guys. So we're going to do our top 5 linebackers. I have 2 honorable mentions that I want to throw out there. Jake, I think you might have a similar amount. So let's start with those guys here. Like, who are 2 guys in particular I would say we can kind of spend some time on that didn't quite crack your top 5?
I would say I'll say Eugene Asante and Nick Martin.
Okay, let's start with Asante then, because neither of them made my list either. I also did not get a chance to watch either of these players. I kind of ran out of time for linebackers near about 10, and they just didn't make my list. But I will be watching anybody, especially that you talk about today that I didn't watch. I will be going back and watching before at the end of the draft season. But what did you think of Asante out of Auburn here?
Yeah, well, Asante especially, but really for both of these two, the big thing that stuck out to me was their ability to play against the run. They're both very, very aggressive, especially Asante. He flies through the line of scrimmage on run plays. He's very aggressive. He's very athletic. He does a good
tested really well at the combine. I know. I think he ran in the 4.4s, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, he's quick. But yeah, he's very, very aggressive on run defense. Against the pass, could be a little bit better, but I think because he's so athletic, especially for a linebacker, that's a big thing. In pass, he is athletic enough that I think he can do well against man coverage. I think he does well. He can stay with like tight ends and running backs coming out of the backfield, which is a large part of what linebackers are doing in pass defense. But yeah, for him especially, he's not well rounded enough to me to make it in my top 5. But I just love how aggressive he is against the run. That was one thing that really stood out to me.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of guys in this class that I think would be, especially the ones that didn't make my top 5, are primarily guys who you expect to make an impact against the run first and foremost, or just guys that don't have the coverage feel or instincts at this point. And some of it is because they're younger players, some of it just because they just might not have that at this point in their careers. It takes a while for linebackers to develop that. And as you said, you feel pretty similarly about Nick Martin as well at Oklahoma State.
Yeah. Nick Martin kind of does the same thing, except he's a bit smaller and he doesn't have as good instincts. So that was one thing I noticed. So he's lower on my list than Asante. But
gotcha.
Another play, he's very physical. He shows good burst, closing in on runners.
I think he tested decently well too at the combine, from what I remember. So
yeah, he could be a little bit better tackling in space, and like I mentioned, his instincts. If he's so aggressive and physical against the run that if he could develop instincts and start to read plays a little better, he could be a real difference maker there in the NFL. With that said, he's a little small, so that is something that I worry about with him.
Yeah, I think he was on the lighter side at the combine for sure.
Yeah, and that's something that I noticed, especially once offensive linemen in the running game are able to get a good hold on him, he struggles to get away. And he is coming off a knee injury as well, so that also had him lower on my list. But both of those two, I like watching linebackers that love to go get in the backfield and tackle somebody, which is, that's what you would want every linebacker to do, but especially
ideally,
the most ideally.
Yeah, fair enough. So 2 guys I'll mention that just missed my top 5. 2 players that, especially one of which was kind of a big name going into the season a little bit, in particular. One would be Danny Stutzman. He's my number 7 linebacker out of Oklahoma. He's a throwback in a lot of ways. Some of them good, some of them bad. I think he's a really good run defender. Realistically, because he's a really good run defender, let me put it this way: he looks like he'd be a really good run defender. And, you can take that however you want to take it, but he looks like he'd be a good run defender. A little bit of a taller, bigger build for a linebacker, especially nowadays. He's a little over 6'3", I think 230 plus pounds, which used to not be a big linebacker, but at this point kind of is, especially compared to some of these guys in this class. But again, he plays the run really well. He's a thumper type for sure. The fluidity and coverage isn't really there, and I think the problem with that ultimately is how many downs can he play. And I know the run game is coming back in the NFL, so there's room for a player like this on the defense, right? Like Landon Roberts was really big for the Steelers. For those of you who don't know, I am a Steelers fan, and Jake writes a lot about the Steelers, so he knows what I'm talking about. Like that type of player, I think, is still something you need in the NFL. Do I think Stutzman is necessarily going to be that good against the run? Maybe not, but I think that's what his niche is going to be. His athleticism, he tested well at the combine. I didn't really see it on tape very much, unfortunately for him. I think the pursuit speed's okay, but he's just kind of clunky in open space. And it just kind of gets him in trouble a little bit. I think he would be like a first and second down linebacker primarily. And then kind of in the opposite vein, Jeffrey Bossa out of Oregon was my number 6 linebacker. I think he's a good player, but I think he does look like a safety that is now playing linebacker. Just to be honest, sometimes that's a good thing, sometimes it's a bad thing. For him in coverage, I think it's a good thing. Yeah, right. Yeah, about he's if you can't tell back there in the back, it's a Raiders fan here too.
Unfortunately,
so, yeah, unfortunately. Hey, maybe not as much recently. It's been pretty good offseason, I think, for you guys. But that's for another type of show at some point, maybe. But with Boss, I think it just comes down to the fact he's going to be a good cover player. I think he has coverage instincts coming from that safety spot before, but not as good of an athlete as you maybe want him to be as a former safety in general, especially like an open field athlete. And I think that the run game stuff is just new to him still. Like I think he isn't very instinctive against the run. I think that he plays hard, but he doesn't really know, I think, what he's doing a lot of the time. I think he tries to just focus on what his keys are supposed to be and not actually reading out the play that well. So you hope that eventually if he can do that, maybe he can become a 3-down player. But for now, I'd probably only want him out there in like true passing situations, and even then, he's not this dynamic athlete that's going to like change the game in coverage. I think he's just a good coverage linebacker, if that makes sense. So, did you watch either of those guys for your rankings? Did you care for?
I watched a little bit, yeah. Okay. I really like Bossa. I think he has like the ideal. Like, there's not one thing to me that stands out specifically, but he does a lot of things really well. I mean, like he has good discipline in coverage. He's got good size. He looks like he moves smoothly. He could be a little
pretty fluid athlete. Yeah,
a little better infield, but for a linebacker, I mean, I think he does pretty well. I mean, he's pretty solid against the run. He gets off blocks well. I didn't really see him miss. I didn't watch him as much as you, I don't think, but I don't remember seeing him miss like any tackles. So yeah, I like him a lot. I think his skill set is well rounded enough that he can find a role at least as a depth player in the NFL. And for Stutzman, I think clunky is a great way to describe it because he's not slow. Like he's not slow, but it just doesn't like.
He's not fluid. You know? He's not a fluid athlete, right? Like I think in a straight line he might be faster, and he ran faster at the combine than Boston, but I think getting to a position to even run in a straight line at somebody is hard for him to kind of do.
Yeah, he can run straight to the flat, but I wouldn't want him against like an arrow route or something.
No, I think he'd be turning around still by the time the guy's in the end zone. Like he's the type of linebacker. Taking this to Madden for those of you who are somehow still a fan of that, you would not want him covering that in the red zone because then it would be just an immediate throw the ball situation there at him. So, but yeah, realistically, those two are both like I think they're the same type of like in terms of talent level, just two different flips of the coin. Like. Two different sides of the same coin. One is to me, like especially in terms of like high impact potential plays, one is really a coverage player and one is a run defender. So it's kind of your pick your poison situation. What do you need for your defense? And then we'll jump into our top 5. I wanted you to give me your top 5 or your 5th player first, because I feel like our list from what you gave me is going to be a lot different. So I'm curious where we kind of fall on some of these guys. So who's your number 5 player at linebacker?
5 for me is Jack Kaiser.
Gotcha. Okay, out of Notre Dame. Cool. Tell me all about him. Jake, what do you got for Kaiser here?
One of the biggest things that I liked about him is his instincts in run defense. That's one of the most valuable tools for a linebacker for me. He diagnoses plays quickly. And I think he's really good in the run game. He's got upper body strength, so he's hardly ever getting walled off when he takes on blocks. He uses his hands well. He's pretty physical in coverage. Which I like. He's a good tackler. He's kind of old though. He's gonna be 25, so that
couple older linebackers in the class. But
yeah. He's not really too great of an athlete overall. And in coverage, I think he could be a little more aware. I feel like he took all of the football instincts and put them into run defense.
Yeah.
And then his lower body strength. He plays with upper body strength. Like his hands are physical, and he's strong there. But I feel like his lower body is gonna have to get a bit stronger in the NFL because he could kind of get pushed out of his gap at times. Which At the age of 25, you don't really want that happening
Not
in college.
ideally,
So it's something
realistically, yeah.
that hopefully we built up in the NFL. But yeah, he comes in at 5 for me.
So for me with him, I did watch a little bit of him. Again, like the age thing with,
Yeah,
especially with linebackers. Now he does, like you said, he has good instincts. So I kind of feel like whatever he's going to be in the NFL, he'll be able to be it sooner than maybe some of the other guys in this class. To where like, all right, you're going to be a player in 2 years for me, right? Like that's kind of how linebacker oftentimes works nowadays. Is you're not drafting somebody typically, especially a linebacker, to be the guy for your linebacker room in year one. Like you're just not really going to do that. And with him, you probably can to some degree, but how much of an impact is he going to actually be? Not he's a big-ish linebacker for modern day, but he's still 231 pounds. Didn't do a whole lot of anything at the combine. I don't think he did any testing. Um, I don't think he's going to test very well if he does test it. I don't know when Notre Dame's
not
combine or
not the greatest athlete.
yeah, pro day is going to be, but he's an instinctful player that plays the run well. But to me, I kind of think that that's what Stutzman is. Just he's at least got a little bit more juice to him. You know what I mean? Like, and he's younger. Now, are either of them going to ever be like truly good coverage players? Probably not, right? And so, like at the end of it, does it matter too much between the two? I don't know, but yeah, that's why Kaiser was a little bit farther down my list, just because at least with Stutzman, I think he does offer like a little bit of that speed to element to him.
Yeah.
He can chase guys down a little bit better, but yeah, so that's where I'm at with Kaiser. So for my fifth guy here, though, I have Barrett Carter out of Clemson, and I want to like him more because he actually has some legit juice. I think like I would have loved to see him test. I don't know if there's a reason he didn't. I don't remember at this point. Maybe he'll test at Clemson's pro day. I didn't check that before we hopped on. Good podcasting, Shane. Don't check that before you hop on the podcast. But I like the athleticism with him. This is the type of linebacker that NFL teams take in like the second round nowadays and say, hey, let's see if we can teach this guy to play linebacker because he's got the movement skills. He can man guys up and man coverage. He's slow to diagnose things a little bit. It's just what it is right now. I think he doesn't have a ton of instincts at the position. He graded out as a good run defender from PFF, but I think there's a lot of work still to be done there. Had a over 10% missed tackle rate.
You can kind of get by on that a little more being a good athlete in college, I think.
That's the thing, right? Like you can make splash plays that probably upped his grade, but his missed tackle rate I think was above 10%, which isn't massively bad, but as a linebacker, when you are kind of the guy that's meant to make a lot of tackles for the defense, you want to keep that under 10% if you can. But he's kind of a sawed-off build of like 6 foot 231. Added a little bit of play weight this year, so there was an improvement on like the true linebacker stuff. But to me, like his value is going to come down to like how much of an impact can he be in coverage with that athleticism, and can he run sideline to sideline and actually cut off run plays, like stop those outside runs from getting big chunk gains, right? Like that's where he's going to become a really valuable linebacker if he can. Kind of looking at a guy that was, I think, a little similar to him coming out of the same school, Trenton Simpson, now playing for the Ravens. He hasn't really done that, right? He's still a great athlete. And he's probably a better athlete than Carter, but he just hasn't really learned how to play linebacker actually yet. So that's kind of the risk you take with this guy. I think he's a little bit farther along as a true linebacker. They asked him to do more linebacker-y things, for the lack of a better term, at Clemson than they did Simpson or guys like that. But he is kind of a true wild card to me of like, if the athleticism can develop him into a good linebacker, if that allows him to give him time to become a good linebacker, he could end up being honestly the best one from this class, or at least one of the 3 best, I think.
Yeah, he's number 2 for me.
Okay, which again, I get betting the upside here if that's what you're doing too. Like,
I love athletic linebackers. It's like
so does the NFL, so you're on the same track as them. So.
Yeah, he's a fun guy to watch. He just moves well for the position. He's athletic enough. I don't worry about him covering tight ends or running backs. But
I think that's where he's going to be good immediately. Yeah. I think if you want to play him early.
Yeah. But he's also got good discipline and coverage. I think he reads QBs well. He rarely gets caught out of position in zone. And he uses that athleticism against the run. I think he takes good angles. I really didn't see him miss too many angles. I think he could be a little stronger, maybe shed blocks a little better, but I think just watching him play, I just feel like there's so much potential there. And so that was why he was 2 for me.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Yeah.
Again, I get like if you're betting on upside in this class, there's two guys who I think have the right combination of still younger players who have the athletic tools to be like legit 3-down linebackers that could develop into one of the 10 best of their position in the NFL. Right. There's two guys that fit that mold. Carter, despite being 5, is one of those for me, but there is just that risk. Like, does he just not figure it out at the next level enough to be on the field all the time? It's kind of the thing with him for me. But who's your number 5 then? You said you Kaiser, right? You said it was number 5 for you. Sorry for that. Chris Paul is mine up. I'm going to go here with my number 4 guy, Chris Paul Jr. out of Ole Miss. Fun player, very fun player. If he was like a tick more explosive, to me, I think he would be probably my second linebacker in this class because I really love the instincts with him. I think he plays very hard at the point of attack. I think he takes on blocks well. He is just a little lighter. He's 6'1", 222. I think that's kind of something in his game that I don't know how much heavier he could play really than that. I thought he did kind of slim down a little bit for the combine to run a little bit better, but I think he's really fluid athlete, similar to Bossa in a lot of ways in terms of like the athleticism. It's not pure like explosive speed, but it's very consistent. Like he gets up to speed quickly. He has good burst. Just isn't the fastest overall, like in a 40-yard sprint type of situation. And I think his testing kind of showed that. But just very fluid, knows what he's doing out there. I saw an interview with him with the Bootleg Football podcast guys, Brett Coleman and EJ Snyder. They're talking to him about a play he made. I forget which team, but he was supposed to rush and he like jumped out into coverage because he read a key that the guy was going to throw it and threw right to him and he intercepted it. Like he's a very smart player. He's experienced, played a lot of snaps in college, so he's a guy that I think if you need like a second linebacker, especially like a weak side linebacker, he might be able to do that for you like day one. Like I think he might be able to be a starter for a defense day one. Maybe not a high end one, but could become one over time, I think, as he develops a little bit.
Yeah, I liked him a lot. I had him at 4 also.
Okay, so we're the same 4 there. Cool.
Yeah. I think he could have a little better instincts in run defense, and I think his pad level when he tackles is a little too high. But aside from those 2 things, there's nothing else that I don't like. I mean, I like everything else that he does. And I think the way that he looks, like his frame, I feel like he can put on more weight. And
I think he might have slimmed down for the combine.
Yeah.
I really think, because I think he was probably 230 plus on film, I think.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, and the way he plays comes with a lot of athleticism, so I don't want him to put on like a ton of weight, but I do think there is some room to get stronger there. But yeah, I know exactly what play you're talking about where he had that interception. He has really good ball skills for a linebacker.
Yeah, for what it is. Yeah, so
it's pretty impressive. Yeah, no, I like everything about him. I think the pad level thing can be coached, obviously.
The type of stuff can be coached for sure. I think
instincts will come as he goes in the NFL, but yeah, I agree. I think he can develop into a good starting linebacker.
Yeah, great. Who do you have at 3 then?
Shmael Mondon Jr.
So this is a guy that I actually didn't get a chance to watch, unfortunately, which was when you brought his name up. I'm like, okay, he's definitely going to be one of the guys I have to go back and watch. So, because you have him here at 3. So tell me more about Shmael here.
He's another athletic player. So that's been the theme from my list kind of so far. But,
which again, the NFL will tell you the same thing.
Yeah. He's got good size and frame for his position. He's a guy that's quick enough. He'll be able to stick with tight ends and backs in coverage. Another guy with good instincts in zone coverage. One thing I really like though was that you really don't see out of a lot of linebackers is he has really good instincts in man coverage, where he kind of can read what a receiver is going to do. And that's something that I feel like I don't see from a lot of linebackers. So that was something,
especially not college linebackers.
Yeah,
like you rarely see that.
He's able to mirror receivers well. Like he anticipates things well. With that said, the instincts and run defense aren't there. I saw him fall for some pretty simple fakes on film. So that's something that's going to have to be improved, especially in the NFL.
A Georgia linebacker that lacks instincts? No way. Just ask any Packers fan what that's like. Anyway, good.
I think he could bring a little bit more pop. He doesn't really. He's not much of a
Smaller
hitter.
player too.
Yeah. And that kind of affects him taking on blocks. Struggles a little bit there. And I think as a pass rusher, he shows some promise, but he doesn't have like a go-to move that he can really use. So it's gonna be something that can be adjusted, but I think he does enough things well that the potential is there. But yeah, he is a smaller linebacker. He's a player that I think I'm higher on than a lot of people.
I would
So
say from what I've
yeah,
seen, yeah. I mean, there's people that have him closer to the top 5 than I. Well, we'll see where I'm at with him when I get a chance to watch him fully. But yeah, he's definitely outside of the top 5 for most things
yeah,
I've seen. But I think some people are like Georgia linebacker. I don't know. Like, I think there's a lot of that going on. Where it's like the defense for Georgia churns out a lot of good players, not really in the linebacker room. Like at least not true off-ball linebackers typically. Which don't helmet scout people. It's one thing. Definitely don't do that. But for some people might do that. So, but for me, my number 3 player, this is a player that I really like. I will say I don't know how old he is. I don't have a date of birth on him, but I'm assuming he's probably closer to 24 than 23. So there's an element of that there. But Demetrius Knight Jr. out of South Carolina, super fun player. He's an average athlete, I would say, but he plays very physical. He's really hard to sustain blocks against. Like he's going to be a really good early down player, and I think there is enough like coverage there with him and instincts where he doesn't. One of the things I look for in linebacker, especially at the college level, because you just don't see it a whole lot, is are you able to cover not just space in zone coverage, but guys and actual receivers as they come into your zone, like, or are you just going to kind of stay where you're at regardless of what happens? And he does react to a lot of what comes through his zone, and he has a feel for when a player is like crossing behind him in zone coverage, or things like attaching himself to guys when they come through his zone. Like you see more of that with him than I think a lot of other guys in this class, especially farther down the board. And combine that with the fact that he's a really hard-nosed run defender, I could see him easily working his way into being like a Nick Bolton type of linebacker where he's not the most overwhelming athlete in the world, but he does everything really well. He's a smart guy. He'll be in the right position a lot of the time, and he'll make a really good linebacker for 5 or 6 years as a starter for somebody.
yeah. I didn't watch as much as him as some of the other guys, but I did watch him a little bit. I one of the things that really stood out to me was run defense.
Yeah.
That was the biggest thing for me. I think he takes on blocks really well, and like you said, he has good instincts there. He's not necessarily the most laterally agile
No,
player.
not really. He is a little bit.
But
He's also about 10 pounds heavier than some of the other guys we talked about today. So he's 235, 60s. So he's again a little bit more like a traditional size linebackers than some of the other guys we talked about. So.
Yeah, but I do think he has good instincts in coverage, so that kind of helps him there. But yeah, I didn't watch him quite as much because I kind of ran out of time. But
Gotcha. Yeah, that's where I'm at with some of the guys.
I did like what I saw from him.
Sounds good. Then let's move to our number 2 players then here. I'll kick things off because this is a guy I don't think you mentioned to me pre-show, so I'm curious if you just didn't get a chance to watch him much yet or if you're just not high on him. My number 2 linebacker is Carson Schwetzinger out of UCLA. This guy, he's probably, to me, like if I had to pick somebody in this class to play a linebacker for me on 3 downs tomorrow, it would be him. Despite the fact he didn't really play a ton until this year, like he's a good athlete, not a great one, but I think he knows what he's doing in all areas of the field. Like he plays the run very hard. He will get washed in the run game sometimes because he's a little bit of a smaller player, but so he's not as good at taking on blocks as like a Demetrius Knight Jr. or some other guys in this class, but he will diagnose and get in the backfield a lot on run plays. Like I saw him make a couple huge run stops where like no one even touched him because he just kind of saw it right away and dove through the line essentially and got skinny. Was able to get behind his blockers and stuff like that. Coverage instincts, you can definitely tell he has a feel for where space is on the field, where he's at, kind of can attach himself to guys similar to what I said with Demetrius Knight Jr. But I think he has a little bit more, just a little bit more speed to him in general, just a little bit more agility to him than Knight Jr. has. So kind of just a better version of him outside of the taking on blocks aspect of things, which I do would like to see him do that more. But he also he weighed in at 240 at the combine. Now, he didn't test. Maybe he just wanted to be big at the combine, but he did jump exceptionally well despite that weight. So maybe he can kind of keep that same explosiveness at that weight. And if he can be closer to 240 instead of 225 where he's listed, then we're maybe going to see a little bit different version of him at the NFL level. But in general, I think if I had to play a game tomorrow, I think I'd want him to be the guy that I'd be asking to play linebacker. So.
Yeah, I watched a bit of him, but he was another guy I kind of ran out of time with. So I didn't get a full evaluation, but I liked a lot of what I saw. I think, if I was able to watch him more, he would have probably been in my top 5. He's very, very good athlete, from what I've noticed. Speed, which is something that the NFL seems to be prioritizing more and more with the position. Changes direction quickly. He's got very fluid hips.
Yeah, he moves very well in and out of different positions that you might find himself in.
I haven't looked into him quite as much, but I have heard people talk about kind of the lack of experience that you mentioned.
Yeah, he didn't really start at all until this past year, but then he played exceptionally well. So then everyone's like, was that just coaches being bad? Was he
it's UCLA.
I mean, nothing against UCLA, but maybe. Whatever, but it's a weird situation. So but his tape this year is good, man. It just is. And I think maybe I'm wrong about this, or at least he did at one point. But I think Daniel Jeremiah has him in his top 50 players, which I'm not necessarily.
I've seen some people very high on him,
right? So I'm not necessarily top 50 guaranteed. We'll see what my board looks like, which, by the way, will be a thing that we do. We will have our boards at the end of this draft season before the draft kicks off, but. He's going to be close to that probably for me because I think he's a day one impact linebacker potentially, as much as one can be in the NFL nowadays, which not very often anymore. But so we talked about your number 2 player with Carter, I think, right? So give me your number 1 linebacker currently.
My number 1 is Jalen Walker, and I know Shayne is viewing him as.
I am viewing him as an edge.
Which I know a lot of people.
Yeah, so. I will talk about him more when we get to our rankings. But tell me more about him as a linebacker.
So I totally get people viewing him that way. I can't really blame that thought process. But I think he can be used well as a linebacker in the NFL. I think he's got good size. He's pretty versatile. His speed and athleticism are good. They make him good in man coverage. He shows good discipline in zone coverage. And those are 2 big reasons I think he can play well at linebacker. Just at least, I don't see any problems with him in pass defense at all. I think he takes on blocks well in the run. He's got good strength. He doesn't have a lot of experience at the position, so that is a big thing. And I get that. Another thing I noticed, he likes to take on. He can. He shows the ability to take on blocks really well, but sometimes he'll just go so square straight into a blocker, and I'm just what was the thought process there? But I know that he can do it, so it's not a huge worry. But for me, he's good enough against the run to me, and I think he'll be good in coverage that I could see him as a linebacker, but I definitely understand the crowd who does not see that. So
and I'll kind of expand on this when we get to him and my edge rankings later, which he's a weird player for me. I had no idea where I was going to land on him, and the answer is still kind of I don't know, to be honest with you. He'll rank not as high in the edge rankings for me as I wanted him to, but I think his best plays come from the edge, as a guy who's truly trying to get after the passer. And I think he does have great athleticism. He's a really well-built player. And I think if you have a guy that's in the 240s that has the athleticism that he has, and as much as the coverage instincts, I don't think they're terrible, but I do feel like sometimes he gets lost in space. And again, he doesn't play the position actually. He doesn't actually play linebacker technically for them, in my opinion. He plays this weird hybrid role situation, which maybe an NFL team will ask him to do something similar. Maybe he can kind of be effective in that way, but I'm viewing him as just one or the other right now. I don't think this is especially because it's same side of the ball, but I do not view him as a guy who plays both exactly the same or something like that. I just think his more highlight plays come at edge, and I think his future is brighter at edge because it's easier to take a great athlete and make him an edge rusher than it is to make him a great linebacker. Just harder to do. So I think a team probably, if they do use him at linebacker, might just ask him to do some linebacker things sometimes, but not necessarily be like the Mike linebacker. But so my number one though, and I'm curious if this is a guy that you just didn't get to watch either that much, or if you're just lower on him, but Jahad Campbell out of Alabama is kind of the consensus like true linebacker, like in terms of like guy that's like an actual definitely linebacker. He has the opposite thing of Jalen Walker, where he was an edge rusher coming into college, like he was an edge rush prospect, and he's moved over to playing like true Mike linebacker for Alabama. And I think overall, he's done a pretty good job of that. Like, I do think he still has time to develop there. I think he has some things he has to develop. But similar to how you have a lot of guys that are really good athletes in your top 5, he ultimately is my number one because of how much of an athlete he can be at times. Plus, Super Bowl but yeah, he's very fun to watch play. But again, he does, like, if I need a linebacker to play tomorrow, he might not be my choice. Let me just put it that way. But I think he's farther along than, like, a Barrett Carter to me. But he also has more overall explosiveness than him. And I think he's a bigger player as well. Like, he's more well built to handle playing a full-time role as a 3-down linebacker in the NFL. I do think I need to see him get a little bit smarter with his angles when he's pursuing. But he doesn't miss tackles. Like, his missed tackle rate's very low. Like, that's something that matters a lot to me, because if you're a developing linebacker and you're not missing tackles very much, everything else I can work with. But if you're a really bad tackler, that's going to get you in trouble a lot of the time in the NFL.
Yeah.
So for me, because of that low missed tackle rate already, as kind of a guy that's still newer to the position, and the athletic profile, I've seen more of him as a true linebacker. That makes me think he can be one at the next level versus like a Jalen Walker, for example.
Yeah, he's another fun one. I didn't get a complete eval on him, but yeah, very, very fun watch. One of the things I really liked about him was in play action, when he kind of gets caught, like sucked up into the run, he recovers so well. Like,
he either does that or he just commits fully and just destroys the quarterback. It's like if he knows
like,
that I can't, it's like if he knows he can't get back in coverage and make an impact, he's like, I'm just going to run through the face of the quarterback and he'll have to deal with me. And it works sometimes, like it just does. So it's a weird player in terms of like where he's going to be asked to do right now in the NFL when he gets drafted. But he's the kind of guy you take and hope that he becomes like a legitimate top 5, top 10 linebacker eventually.
Yeah, he's got all the tools. Very, very athletic. And as you said, he's a good tackler as well. Yeah.
So that'll do it for our linebacker rankings. Again, very different, which not surprising for this position. You could tell me almost anything. I'd be like, sure, man. If you believe you can become a great NFL linebacker, hopefully an NFL team is right about that, and you get to be right about that. But let's move to our edge rankings, which I think is going to be a little bit more fun for sure.
Yeah.
Doing our top 10 edge rushers here. Now, there's a lot. I watched personally. I have 18 full profiles for the edge rushers, so some guys I need to get to later, but. So there's plenty of honorable mentions to kind of go around. But to start things off, though, Jake, give me 2 names to start off. We'll talk about probably a couple others too, but give me 2 that one player that you think you're lower on than others, and one player you think you might be, even though they're not in your top 10, might be higher for you than others. That's a good way to do it.
I like that. One player that I might be lower on is JT Tuimalu.
Okay.
And then one player that I think I'm higher on would be David Walker.
Okay. So it's interesting. So I'll kind of piggyback off that a little bit. So David Walker was my 16th player. We'll talk about him for a second. Out of 18 guys I've watched so far. And honestly, like, I want him to be higher. But I'm like, it's an FCS player.
I feel that.
And like, I don't want to say anything bad about FCS. There's a lot of great players at FCS, but like, it's just kind of hard to know how much of it translates. Now, at the Senior Bowl, I think he looked pretty good. He performed well at the Combine. Like, he's kind of checking the boxes to where, like, I might move him over a couple guys that are definitely, like, more well thought of than him. But he's a little bit of a weird build. He's like that 6'1" and change, whatever, like 260 pounds.
He's got a strange build.
He's sawed off a little bit is kind of the term that I typically hear used, and I agree with that in the case of a guy like him. But it kind of works for him. Like, it kind of, like, I can't sit here and say that it's a bad thing necessarily. It's just a little weird to kind of work around. Like, the Combine, I was pulling it up here just because I want to double check. He's 6'1", 263 with sub 32-inch arms. not the profile you typically want to see
No,
for an edge rusher. Now,
no.
again, that's changing, I think, a little bit with some players. And there's going to be a couple players we talk about where you kind of have to believe in the talent or the skill set more so than the frame. And I think that's okay. But he's an interesting player just at the end of the day. I think that he has a chance to be a really good power rusher type guy. And he does, weirdly enough, at least in the tape that I watched, he kind of has a little bit of ability to drop into like a hook zone and kind of do some fun stuff with that. So you can do a little bit of everything with him. I do think he's a stand-up guy, despite being 260 plus. I think he is a stand-up edge for sure. Like the height isn't great, the length isn't great. You kind of want to give him a runway to build up some power and speed that way. But fun player for sure. And then you said JT is a guy that you think you're a little bit lower on.
Yeah. With him, for me, a big part of it is I just worry about his lack of athleticism kind of limiting him as a pass rusher.
Right. And
There
just
are
for
a lot of things that
clarification,
I like
real quick,
about him.
where do you rank him in your like overall rankings?
Oh, he's 12 for me.
Okay, because he's 14 for me, so I think we're a similar
Okay.
boat. We're like now, granted, 14 in this class of edge like still puts him probably at the end of day 2. Like he's
Yes.
a good edge class. Like I like this. So it's not that he's a bad player, but you go ahead. I just want to make sure we knew where we stood on that. So
Yeah, my biggest worry about him is just having kind of a low ceiling as a pass rusher. He's
yeah,
not super quick or athletic. He doesn't have a ton of bend when he's going around the corner. I feel like I watched him kind of like stumble a lot of times when trying to get the edge. And there are a lot of things he does well. I mean, he has a good bull rush. Like
yes,
he can get in there. Um, I just he's got good size and good frame, so I'm not worrying about him not being strong enough. But I just wonder how well that will translate to the NFL because with his athleticism, I think he really needs to be able to do that. And he has a nice move where he'll bull rush and then like spin like inside or outside off of it. But aside from that, I didn't see that much in the pass rushing department for him. I do like what he does against the run, and
yeah.
he can move his like he's not like a non-athlete. Like he can get around, but I worry about his overall ceiling as a pass rusher. So that's why he was a little lower for me. And I feel like I've seen him be top 10 for a lot of people. So
Yeah.
maybe I'm in the normal spot, but I feel like I'm a little bit lower. But and with that said, I still think he will be a good NFL player.
Yeah, and
It's a talented class.
yeah,
So.
as someone who has him at 14, like it's not because I think he's not a good edge rusher. I just think that he's a limited one in a lot of ways. Where I think what you see is what you get. You get a good edge setter in the run game. You get a guy who has legitimate NFL power. I think he's going to be able to run through some lighter tackles and guys who don't have the best arm length in the class, like that he goes up against. I think he will give those guys problems. It's something that actually Olu Fashanu, the left tackle now for the Jets, who was drafted last year, he had some of his worst games in college against JT. Not because he's this overwhelming athlete, but because he just had the power to push him back, right? Like that's one of the things that I think Olu struggled with a little bit. So he's going to be able to do that against guys who have maybe not the best anchor or who don't have the best weight profile overall. But he's going to be limited against guys that can handle that power. Like I don't know if he necessarily has a great counter to that right now. But he's going to be, I think, ideally he's a low end number 2, high end number 3 type of edge. Like I think that's kind of what you want him to be, hopefully. And if that's what you draft him for, I think you'll get what you asked for. If you draft him to be more than that, it might be a little bit disappointed. So, so I'll give 2 guys I think I'm definitely higher on and lower on, but still outside my top 10. So this one's tough. Jack Sawyer is my 18th ranked edge.
No.
He, to me, like I think similar things about him and JT, but I just think JT actually has legitimate NFL power. I don't think that Sawyer necessarily does. Like when I watch him, I'm like, this is a guy that's talked about. Like I've heard conversations about him at the end of round 1, and I'm like, what are we
No.
like? What are we talking about? Like he is a strong, but like not very. I don't think he's very well built. Like his lower half is weirdly skinny. Like I think he has a good upper body strength, but I don't think he plays with enough power as a rusher to really win consistently with a bull rush. He does not have good speed. He just doesn't. He's not very athletic overall. he's very tough as a run defender. I think he will have like use as like a run defender in the next level, but I don't know how he wins. Like I just didn't see a lot of clean wins in college, and when it was against guys who just like their feet are bad. Like he was able to kind of inside counter on them sometimes, which that he showed some of that. But I think against tackles who could move their feet, it's just not going to be super effective. And like both him and JT had phenomenal playoff performances, like phenomenal playoff runs. I think both of them had almost a third of their edge production in those 4 games against like in the playoffs, which on one hand you're like, that's great, they stepped up. But on the other hand, you're like, you watch the games, you're like, yeah, they were good, but they didn't really win in like ways that the NFL is going to really care about, in my opinion. Like I don't, and again, that's Ohio State fans. If you don't like that, that's fine. You won the national title. You can say whatever you want. But those two guys, just to me, aren't like these bona fide, even number 2 edges. Like I think JT is definitely like capable of being one. Maybe Jack could be too, but I just don't view them as like legitimate NFL pass rushers to me.
Yeah, I have. I got Sawyer number 10. So
Okay.
he's a little bit higher than JT, and the main reason for that is I just think he's a little bit better with his hands.
Which I will give you that. Like I think he uses his hands well, but like it's
that's the only reason he's higher.
to what end? Then
aside from that, with him, it's another. He's not getting off the line fast,
right?
And he's not really an incredible athlete overall, and he's, as you kind of said, kind of stiff. So a lot of some of the same things I said about JT. So they are ranked. I think they're only 2 spots away.
Yeah, 2 spots. You said.
I just think that Sawyer is a little better with his hands. Like I feel like he can win that way a little more. And I think I will say I think JT has a better bull rush, but I think Sawyer can just push the pocket too if he needs to.
Yeah, I agree with JT having the better overall bull rush there. So yeah, like that's 2 guys. And one guy that I want to mention is a guy that I might be a little bit higher on than most. I'm not sure about this because I feel like it depends on how you view this guy. Because I planned on viewing him as a guy that was going to play inside a little bit more, but then I watched him like, no, actually, I think he's fine at edge. Jordan Burch out of Oregon is my number 11 edge rusher. I'm not sure where you have him, Jake, but
he's 13 for me.
13, okay, so similar range. But with him, the power plays, like it really shows up on film that this guy has really good power. And again, he might have played even heavier than this in college, but at least at the combine, he weighed in at, I believe it was 279 at 6'4", with good arm length. Like this is a guy and he ran really well too. Like this, he's got some speed to power potential. Let me put it that way. Like he can really, like if you line him up on a track and get him going against a tackle that doesn't handle power very well, he's going to end up on the ground. And that matters at the next. Like I think power more and more, like everybody loves, like, and there's a couple guys that definitely fall in this category that are pretty high on my list, admittedly. But there's this, like, people are enamored with the guy that like bends the corner super quickly, gets quick pressure, like, that type of guy. But those guys typically often when they lose bad, right? Like they get washed out of the play or they just get completely stuffed at the line. Like, but those players are obviously, they get the splash plays more often, stuff like that. But power ultimately plays in this league. Like when you're going to the next level, if you don't have some semblance of power, you're typically going to be limited more often than you would be if you don't have speed, in my opinion, especially like elite speed. If you have good enough speed, you can still win as a speed rusher at the next level. You can still rip through guys and get under them. You have to have a level of bend still to it as a power rusher. But if you can just run through somebody's face, there's not much you can do about that if you can do that. Like if you have the ability to do that, the lineman can't really do a ton to prevent that other than just having a really good anchor and being able to bear down in those situations, which some guys do, some guys don't. You know what I mean? So Birch really is that true like power, like trying to run through your face type of guy. And as a run defender, weirdly enough, I don't think he's that developed in that way. Like I think he's still learning how to set the edge properly. But he has obviously the build for it. Like he should be a good run defender if he can learn how to do that a little bit more consistently. So I'm not sure if you felt similarly about him, but
yeah, the traits with him are very
they're intriguing.
A lot of things very well. For me, the reason why he's not my top 10, I feel like he, especially against the run, and you kind of said he might still be learning it, and that definitely could be the case. But it kind of seemed to me like he just wasn't too like urgent.
It wasn't physical. He wasn't trying to make
Yeah,
plays. I feel like he was
and
trying to
he
just
has
kind
the
of be
tools.
there. Yeah,
Yeah, and that might be something that he's just still figuring out.
maybe. Yeah, it's hard to say.
Yeah, and then I think he's very powerful, and as you said, he has that good bend. So he
Yeah,
has
for his
the
guy his
strength
size, he
for the
can
process.
bend around the edge decently well. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Um, but yeah, I think sometimes when he gets like his first move doesn't work, I don't really see a lot of like urgency there to get
yeah,
out of it.
not a
Those
lot
are
of
those
counters.
are
Yeah.
two big things for me where I can't really tell if that's something that a player's just working through, and something that it can improve in the future, or if it might. And I'm not saying that he's like lazy or anything like that. That's not the point that I'm trying to make. But it just doesn't seem like he has that like tenacity in the run game, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So, but again, he has all the tools, and I think that could be something that he just figures out. So. It's not a huge concern for me, but that was kind of why he was lower. But the potential is very, very high with him.
Yeah, he's one of those guys I think he gets drafted on day 2 and ends up maybe being a pretty good starter earlier rather than later, especially as like a. I think he needs to go to a system. Obviously, it's more of a true like 4-3, like 4 down lineman type of situation with his hand in the dirt. He stood up a little bit at Oregon, but he is obviously close to 280 pounds and maybe played even heavier than that. So that's something you have to kind of factor in with him.
Yeah.
A couple of the names I want to throw out there just to kind of see, because you might have them in your top 10, you might not. So I just want to make sure I bring them up in case we don't. I had Kyle Kennard at 15. He's a guy that I know a lot of people like had a really big final year. A fun player. It's just, I think he's just a little limited athletically overall. Like I think that he doesn't have enough of a pass rush skill set to where I'm like, okay, this guy is definitely going to be a great player. And this guy out of South Carolina, just to make sure people know what we're talking about. Really productive last year, but I think he's just kind of decent at everything. But he doesn't have. Like, he pretty much just wins with length is kind of the problem. And there's a guy that on your team that also won primarily with length at the college level, and hasn't really figured it out as a pass rusher yet. Now, he won't be drafted nearly as high as who I'm talking about, which I'll keep his name out of my mouth for now. But he won't be drafted
He's
nearly as
starting
high
to
as
put
that
it
player.
together. He's
A
starting to put it.
little bit, yeah. But like he's very much like he wins with his length and his ability to just kind of long arm guys, and that's
Yeah.
fine. But I don't know if he'll win in other ways necessarily.
Maybe not at 7 overall.
Yeah, maybe not a 7 overall. So he's a guy I wanted to make sure I mentioned. Someone who's people like a lot, and I wonder if maybe you're one of those people. We'll find out. But Oluwafemi Oladejo out of UCLA, I have a 17. He looks like a linebacker playing edge, and that's kind of the problem because he was a linebacker, now he's playing edge, and not in like the fun like, oh, this guy's like 240 pounds, he's a fire breather. It's like, no, he's still learning how to play edge. Like if you draft him on day 3 and ask him to develop over the next couple of years, you might get something out of him because I think he's a good linear athlete. He doesn't have a lot of agility, weirdly enough, being a linebacker convert. I would have thought that maybe he has a little bit more like lateral quickness and stuff like that, but he's just still figuring it out. And like I don't really want to say that he's not a good player. I just think that he right now looks pretty limited as an edge rusher, and he'll have to kind of learn how to play. So.
Yeah, he's very, very raw. I did have him at 11, so I'm a little bit higher, but
And I get that because you're betting on the upside, hopefully, of him
yeah,
kind of figuring it out. Yeah.
the rawness kind of puts him outside the top 10. But I mean, he's just so he gives a lot of effort, and he's very
Yes.
physical and very
He
strong.
is. He
And
looks like a guy who wants to take
he's
on the
got
run as
length.
like a linebacker.
Yeah, for
So.
me, a lot of the things I think can be worked on as well with him because I mean I feel like a lot of it is kind of just timing stuff and pad level stuff that you kind of just have to play the position more to figure out, and those could be things that he just doesn't ever figure out. This is very possible, but
Gotcha.
I think if he can put that together, I think he could end up being one of the better players from the class.
Yeah, potentially for sure. So, but for now, I kind of was like, I'll take him on day 3 if he makes it there and see if I can figure it
Yeah.
out. Otherwise, I'm okay with missing out with on someone else. Let's move into our top 10s here, just so we can kind of get through that. And we'll talk about some other players that I probably have outside my top 10. That you have outside your top 10, but we'll get there. So, I know your number 10 you already said, which I believe was Sawyer.
Yeah.
Okay. So my number 10, and I hate to put this player so low because I know people are going to hate me a little bit. because he's a guy that's been mocked as high as in the top 10, believe it or not. But I just can't get with Mykel Williams out of Georgia. I don't think he really has a pass rush plan right now at all. Like I don't think he's a very good pass rusher. And this to me feels like the Trayvon Walker thing, where he's not as good of an athlete as Trayvon was. Clearly, if you just look at the testing numbers on film, he's not quite that athlete. But he doesn't really like play edge. Like he's not a stand-up edge like you think he would be.
Yeah.
At Georgia, so it's hard for me to know how much of a pass rusher he can be. Like there's snaps in his tape where I'm like, okay, that was something for sure.
I have a note. I had a note where I just wrote like weirdly slow get off for how athletic.
And again, it's like, what do you like? What's going on with his role and what he does? Like, it's just a weird player, and I think he's going to be one of the best like edge setters in the run game. Like similar to Walker, where like I know I'm getting run defense with this guy. He's big, powerful player. I think he's like over 6'5". I want to say. I think he came in at like 260 pounds. You're getting like a true like legitimate edge defender from a run perspective. But I legitimately don't know if he's ever going to be more than like a 40 pressure guy. And I'm not taking the 40 pressure guy in the top 10 of the drafts. I'm not.
Yeah.
I'm just not doing that. Now, he could end up developing like Trayvon has, where Walker is like a legitimate, like high-end number 2 type of edge rusher now. But guess who they could have had instead is Aiden Hutchinson. So this is the point. It's like you want to take the guy who's a pass rusher that you know he is. And then, if he's a good run defender too, that's awesome. You want that. But, like, I'm not taking him early to be a great run defender and maybe a good pass rusher one day. It's just not kind of how I do things. So that's where I'm at with him. Where did you have Mykel at?
I'm a little higher. I had him at 5.
Okay. And again, if I knew that he played the position legitimately and, like, I had enough snaps to determine how far along he is as a pass rusher, he probably would be higher than 10 for me. But I just don't have it, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Georgia's weird and doesn't like playing guys at the right spot. Anyway, good.
Yeah, part of the reason that he's higher for me is because at the very least I know that I'm getting good run defense.
Yeah, and again,
as you said, I don't think he should be anywhere near a top 10 pick.
No, probably not.
But just because he might not figure it out as a pass rusher. The get off, as I mentioned, it's not. He's a pretty athletic guy, so it's kind of strangely slow to me, and I don't know if that's like something that maybe he'll just get better instincts in the NFL, but I don't know. He also doesn't have like a go-to move as a pass rusher.
How could he? That's kind of the problem. Like how would he find one at this point? Like it's just but no.
And I. Especially in the run, I think he could have better instincts. Like I don't remember seeing him like anticipate a pulling guard, and he can get a little bit undisciplined, like in terms of staying in his gap. But just because I know that I'm getting good run defense, that's enough for me. My cat's giving her opinion as well.
Of course. We need the cat's opinion, so.
But, yeah, I don't know. I don't know about top 10.
Yeah, he just, again, like, I want him to be good because he's got the physical makeup for it, and I think that, like, if they played him as and they even said, because I've seen people talk about this, that he was going to be, like, an actual, like, stand-up, like, pass rusher type, and Jalen Walker played more of that than he did, I think, honestly. And I'm like, hey, that's cool. Walker's got bursts, and he's fun and all that stuff, but, like, Georgia just doesn't like playing defensive linemen in a normal way. And, again, am I going to say anything? They're consistently in the top 5 teams in the nation. I can't say anything, but, like, it doesn't make scouting these guys very easy. It just doesn't. So, like,
I don't care about national titles. I want it to be easy.
Right, like, I need to know whether this guy can actually play from a 3-4 lineman and rush the passer. Can we figure that out now? Anyway, for me, number 9, I'll jump to my number 9 guy here then. Braden Swinston out of LSU, which I wasn't sure what I was going to think about this guy because he kind of came on my radar late in the process. Like, he wasn't somebody I was thinking about very much, and then a lot of guys have moved them up their boards. A lot of he did pretty well at the combine from what I saw. He to me is like the prototypical like second edge rusher for a team that has their number 1. Like, that's who should be taking a guy like this because he's very crafty as a rusher. He has good arm length that he uses to his advantage. He plays his run well for a guy that isn't the biggest edge necessarily. He's in the like mid 250s, I think. Has a good long arm move, can bend the corner occasionally. Not the bendiest guy in the world to me, but he has enough of that. He'll inside counter sometimes. Like he just does everything pretty well. And I think if you have like a true number one edge rusher, this is a guy who could take advantage of having a guy like that across from him. Kind of similar. I think I obviously I view him a little bit lower than Alex Highsmith, but that same type of thing where like he can do really well at everything and can really complement a number one like a TJ Watt type of guy. So that's kind of where I land on with him. So
yeah, he was outside my top 10, but with him, he's kind of another player that I just didn't really get a chance to watch as much.
Okay, gotcha.
There is a lot of things that I did see that he does well. He's got good length and he's got good burst.
Initial burst especially.
Yeah, I think he could be better at kind of just, I guess, deconstructing blocks. I don't think his hand strength and like hand skills are quite there. And I didn't watch him as much as some other guys, but I did notice some times where he would get like left open on the edge and then just get like fall for a fake or something like that, or not be able to set the edge. But again, that's something that can be coached out. But
he relies a lot on his length as a run defense. Like he's not super instinctive there, but he can lock guys out with his arm length. So but who's your number 9 player then?
My number 9 is Princely Umanuan.
Okay, so this is a guy, I have him as 12, and I don't want to, but like, again, he's another player. Like, I love the skill set in terms of just he's a fire-breathing edge, right? But this is your number 9 guy, so I don't want to spend too long because he's my number 12. But and because I'm curious if you feel the same way and kind of why he might not even be higher than for you than 9. Came in later than I thought he was going to the combine. Didn't run quite as well as I thought he would. And then when I look back at the tape, like he is a short area burst guy, but I feel like he doesn't finish plays as much as I would like him to because I think he doesn't have quite that pursuit speed that I want him to have, despite being a true speed rusher. But let me know how you feel about him here, though.
Yeah, he has kind of a weird run a little bit, like the strides.
Yeah, they're not very long strides. He's not a long strider.
Yeah, he's kind of confusing to me. One of the things, like when he is able to time like the snap well, he can get off the ball very, very quickly.
Yeah, very good initial burst.
He just like, I swear, sometimes he just doesn't notice that the ball has been snapped. Like there are some plays where like weird. He either gets off in a millisecond or like he's like, oh, we're playing now.
He's very inconsistent.
So, that's something that can be fixed.
It can, but
yeah, he has short strides. That's just the only way I can say it. I feel like that just makes him a little bit slower.
A little bit, than he would be.
I think he's got some things to work on in terms of pad level and just like keeping his base. But with that said, I think there's a lot of room for potential there. He's got good size. He has good length. His frame is good. When he is able to react to the snap like quickly, he can get off the ball quickly.
For sure.
He's got an array of inside and outside moves that he can work off of. Uses his hands well, and he definitely could be better in the run game, I think. But he recognizes blocks well, which I do think like there's a little bit of instinct there, and I think that can be something to grow off. I don't think he's gonna become a great run defender or anything like that, but he does enough as a pass rusher where he can win on the inside and outside, and he's got the length. He can get off the line when he sees that the ball has been snapped. So he does enough as a pass rusher for just the bit of instincts I see in run defense to keep him in my top 10. But I could see why somewhere a little bit lower on him.
Yeah, I think he's the thing with, and I'm struggling to see like because there's a player I have a little bit higher up my board that we'll talk about in a second or in a little bit here that I think similarly about in terms of like what I think their best role is. So but I think he's just better at the role than Princely will be. But I feel like he's a designated pass rusher type. I really do. Like the run defense isn't so bad. Like he can't play more than like 40% of the snaps or something like that. But if you just tell this guy, like, hey, your job every time you're on the field is just get off the snap as fast as you can and try to kill the quarterback. Like, if you tell, like, I think he's going to be like a 50 pressure, 10 sack potential guy if you just tell him to do that on not that many snaps, like compared to what you normally expect from a player that plays or gets that amount of production. But he does have a weird thing where he doesn't always get off the ball as well as you want him to, despite showing it that he can. You look at his run and his 40, like the 10-yard split's great. The overall 40 is not that great. I don't think he has the ability to keep that speed up for very long. But that gets a quarterback quickly thing. He can do that. I just don't know, like, is he best served as like a third edge rusher technically? Like, is that kind of what he's best served in? And if so, you don't take that guy in the top 50 then, to me. Like, probably not at least, so.
I think that he showed me just enough in terms of like just understanding like blocking schemes and stuff like that. That I think he does have an idea of what's going on in the run. It's just like compared to some of the other guys in this class, it's just not
right. And some guys are really good at it, so I get that. Who is your number 8 guy then here?
Landon Jackson.
Okay, so he was number 13 for me. But he has a very specific skill set that I like, but I do think it's just limiting a little bit. So I'm curious what you think about him once you get into him
here. He's another guy with good length. He's got good size.
Yes, really good size and length,
He's very physical in the run game.
Yep, for
very
sure.
Physical with the point contact. He does a good job taking on blocks. And he uses that physicality and his length he's able to consistently set the edge.
Yeah.
He sees blocks coming. So I really like in run defense. I had a note when I was watching him that I wrote down, and it just said kind of runs like a robot.
He's stiff.
He doesn't have, for being as strong at the point of attack as he is when he's defending the run, I would think that he would have like a little bit better of a bull rush. I thought that was something that he could improve a little bit. But I also think he's just a little bit slow off the line, so that could be a part of that. And I think he could shed blocks better, but with his length and how physical he is, that's something that I think can be improved. But he's a guy where I feel like if I draft him, I know that I'm going to get some solid run defense. And I think he can grow as a pass rusher. But yeah.
I think to me, I have him one spot ahead of JT Tuimoloau because I think he's a better pass rusher version of him. Where I think the ability as a pass rusher there is a little bit more projectable to me. I think his bull rush, it's inconsistent, but when he lands it, it really lands. Like because he just has a little bit more. Yeah, he's got a little bit more raw power. He's a little bit overall just stronger player, I think, in a lot of ways. And the run defense is still really good. Like you said, it's really good. So he should be a really good number 2 edge rusher right away. Like he's the low end of that tier for me of guys who are true number 2s, just because I do worry about the lateral quickness and like our team's going to be able to run stuff at him that he just can't stay with and stuff like that. And we'll tackles who can handle his power, just kind of completely stuff him out of the run or out of the pass game sometimes, probably. So fun athlete, interesting player, but like he's just kind of robotic is a good way to describe it. He's just stiff. He's stiff.
I need to find like what play I wrote because I didn't write a timestamp or anything.
Right, but
I just wrote. I was looking at my notes today as I was kind of putting them all together. Yeah, and I was like, I wrote that he runs like a robot.
He's a stiff player, which like he has a really weird tall like build that does make sense. Unfortunately, like he just doesn't have bend or that type of thing, and a lot of teams care about bend more than anything else. And I think that can be overrated. But with a guy like him, like you better not want bendy edge rushers because he ain't going to be that for you. I hate to break it to you. But no, he's a good player though. My number 8 is Donovan Ezeraku out of Boston College. And I want to like this player again more. Like a lot of these guys, I want to like him a little bit more than I do. But at the end of the day, for him, like he's a really crafty edge, like a guy who really knows what he's doing as a pass rusher. He's going to throw a lot of different stuff at you. Uses his length, which is really good for his size. I think he comes in about 6'2", but 34-inch arms. So, like, stockier build, but really good length to help kind of lock out tackles. Can make him a little bit better of a run defender than I think he would be otherwise. Lots of like with him, but I kind of just I don't know how explosive he ultimately is. Like it feels like sometimes he's crafty because he's got to be crafty. Like I don't know if he's a true like he has good bend for sure, but I don't know how explosive he truly is. And is he going to be able to turn the corner on the more athletic tackles in the NFL? Kind of like a guy like last year, like Chop Robinson, for example. Like he was that type, but he had the true like burst off the line explosiveness to win that way a lot. Well, Azrael could be able to do that, or is he going to have to be super crafty and kind of figure it out and try different stuff on every tackle he faces until he figures something out? Like he's got spins and all sorts of stuff. So like he's got the bag in terms of pass rush moves, but I do think his ceiling might be a little lower than the rest of the guys that have above him. So
yeah, he comes in at 6 for me.
Okay, totally.
He's definitely not the fastest guy off the line of scrimmage, and he doesn't really. He's not explosive, so there's not a lot of speed to turn to power, but he doesn't do that too well. I do like a lot of things that he does well. He had good stats for college. Like he was able to
Play very productive pass
so
rusher,
it was
especially
good production. Something that I think why I'm a little tiny bit higher on him is just I think he sets up his pass moves well, which I think kind of helps with him not being as explosive because he's not going to jump all over you off the snap.
No,
but he knows how to set things up. He has a Euro step.
Oh yeah,
which I see him break out.
There's this little. I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. Taco's just like, what the, and then it's over. Pretty much. Like when it works, it's like, oh geez, okay.
Yeah, he's got the good bend, like you mentioned. There's a few moves that I feel confident that he can win with consistently. So I think for a player who's not as explosive, he has the skill set that I would want. Like if you aren't explosive, so that's why I think I'm a little bit higher on him. With that said, not great in run defense. He does not. I noticed a lot of times where he just kind of he won't stay in his gap. Like he'll try to go around a lineman, kind of like it's like he's rushing the passer, and it just leaves his gap open. So I think he's got to have better discipline there. He just doesn't have a lot of strength in run defense.
Yeah, I think he tries to cheat a little bit and try to make a splash play to help. Like knowing that he's like, I'm probably not gonna be the best edge setter in the world. I'm gonna try to make a play, and I think that does make sense in a lot of ways. But when an edge rusher does that, it can really just you have to plan for that. That can't just be something you just decide to do. Like I think your coach has to be like, hey, do this, and we're gonna do this to compensate.
Yeah. I'm not setting the edge on this play.
Like I'm gonna try to just swim underneath the tackle and not. It's like, hey, when it works, he makes some great splash plays, but the consistency down and down is certainly not quite there. And that's not what you're. And this kind of goes back to the Princely thing. If a team drafts him, it's not because of that. Let's just put it that way. Yeah. They're not drafting him like, hey, you need to be out there for 70 snaps a game, and you're going to play run defense. You're going to set hard edge. She's like, maybe I should just rush the passer a lot of the time. They're like, yeah, actually, that's what we're going to do. Like, and there's nothing wrong with that. He's still number 8 for me, but it's mostly because I'm confident he's going to find a way to rush the passer consistently because of how many different ways he can do that. Kind of honestly, to a lesser degree, like kind of similar to like Laiatu Latu, last year's class, where like not the most overwhelming athlete, not necessarily like he was a bigger player than him, so he's a better run defender. But in terms of pass rushers, like they're not going to wow you with their explosiveness, but they're going to find one of the 12 ways they can beat you every game. Like they're going to find ways to do that. Yeah. So he could be a really productive like number 2 edge rusher, I think.
Yeah. I like him.
And then who do you have up next at number 7 here?
7, I have Nick Scorton.
Okay, so I have him at number 5. And I have him at 5 for a very specific reason, but I'll get into that later. I want to let you start here with him at 7. What do you think about Scorton?
Yeah, in terms of overall like talent, him and Donovan are kind of interchangeable to me. Like he could very well be my 6. I think he's definitely a better. I think he's definitely a better run defender.
Yeah, I agree.
But
bigger too, obviously, helps a lot.
Yeah, well, not being undersized definitely does give him the edge there. He's got good size and he's pretty athletic for it. I really like how he uses his hands. He has good moves. He's accurate with his placement and he's strong with his hands. He does everything well with his hands. And he's got some good moves. He's got a pretty good spin move, which I liked watching on film. He can turn strength to power, which helps him on his bull rush. And he's got a good motor. I don't think I ever saw him give up on a play when I was watching him. He's also a guy that I don't think gets off the line too fast, and I think his leverage could be better, especially coming out of a 2-point stance.
Yeah.
I think he gets walled off a little easier that way. And once that happens, he has good size, but at least I didn't see him be able to fight back from that. Like once he's like off his anchor and getting walled off, and then I think his bend is a little bit worse than Donovan's. So that was part of the reason he was below. I think he's definitely a better run defender. I think he's a slightly worse pass rusher, but he's got a lot of promise there. So yeah, he's 7 for me, but again, it's a talented class. I think he's going to be a good NFL player.
Yeah, again, he was number 5 for me. And I'm just going to read my notes on him because I think it says it about as well as I could. Big, powerfully built edge rusher with stand-up and hand in the dirt flexibility. Wins in multiple ways thanks to a deep bag of pass rush moves. Lacks overall burst and great movement skills, but lost a lot of weight so far in this draft process from his listed weight. If he can play with power at maybe 265 instead of his listed 285, I think he could take a big step as a pass rusher in terms of his burst and his ability to bend. And if that happens, that's where you get him to be like number 5 for me. I think that's what I'm most curious about, because if you go back to when he was at Purdue and listed a little bit lighter, he was more of that like explosive pass rusher in general, at least more so than he was at Texas A&M. But he lost a little bit of that going to Texas A&M, and then the run defense is excellent thanks to his size. Like this is a guy that profiles to me as like a low end number 1, high end number 2. Like if this is your number 2 rusher, you're super happy. If he's your number 1, you're like, hey, he'll get the job done, right? Like that's kind of where I'm at with him, and that's a good position to be in if you have him on your team, because that means that you're one really good edge prospect away from having an awesome pass rush deal, right? Like that's kind of where you want to be at in this league of having 2 guys who can be either ideally number 1s, but at least low end number 1s or high end number 2s, and get you a lot of production from the edge group. So. That's why I had him at 5 here. But who do you have? Or I have number 7 still to go, actually, real quick. This is where Jalen Walker lands for me. And oh boy, Jalen Walker.
I forgot about him. I noticed our lists were a little different. I was like, he's got to have somebody in here that I'm not thinking of. And it's
Jalen Walker. Just super explosive athlete on the field. Like you can see the athleticism, you can see the burst. The problem is, and the reason I couldn't have him any higher, is he just isn't. What position is he really? Like that's ultimately the problem, Jake. Is you have him as a linebacker, I have him as an edge rusher, and that is a problem for me because I can't tell you that you're wrong for having him but I also think you can't necessarily tell me I'm wrong for having him an edge, and you said that earlier. And sometimes that's good, but this guy might legitimately be a true tweener, which you don't really want to be in this business. You don't want to be that guy. And because of his explosiveness, because of how good of an athlete he is, I think he'll be able to figure it out at a position. But I just don't know which one it's going to be, because I didn't love the feel for the game at either spot, but he made high-impact plays. He was productive at times. Now, people will point to the first Texas game and say, oh, what a huge game he had. I think Quinn Ewers is just bad at football, unfortunately. And, I hate to be the guy. If you haven't seen us before, if this is your first experience watching us, I am quite a Quinn Ewers hater. We've talked about him multiple times on the previous version of this draft podcast, and I haven't gained any love for him in the process so far, to put it that way. So he kind of did a lot of it to himself.
He's a Quinn Ewers merchant.
At least in that game, I would say that he kind of was, because Kelvin Banks was like, "What are we doing?" You could tell he's like, "What in the world is going?" He'd turn around like, "Why are you where you're at? What are you doing?" And he was right, in my opinion. I think he was right. So I think Walker has all the tools, but he isn't an edge rusher yet. He's also not a linebacker. So hopefully the NFL figures it out and just puts him in a position he works out. I hope he does. But if he goes top 10 like people say he's going to go, I worry that it's not going to return a lot of investment early is my concern, which, hey, there's another Walker that had the same boat from Georgia. So, but he's turned into a good player. So you hope that that's what happens. But might take a while. So that's kind of where I'm at with him. But so you've already given your piece on Jalen, but anything you wanted to add with him specifically as a rusher that you wanted to throw out, or?
I like him as a rusher.
Yeah.
He's got good bend. He's quick off the line. Yeah, I think you said it best. Said he's like the true version of a tweener.
Yeah, right now at least. Yeah.
I don't know if I like just thinking of the last like years that I've watched players. I don't know if I can find like a better example of a tweener.
I mean, maybe Hassan Reddick, which if he can become Hassan Reddick, sure, sign me up at that point. Like,
yeah, I'll be happy with that.
Yeah, I will happily take Hassan Reddick on my football team, as long as he's not doing whatever the hell was going on last year with the Jets. Which
maybe if he can become that without the like year-long contract holdout.
Yeah, whatever is going on there.
That would be ideal.
Now that we said that, he's definitely going to somehow end up a Cardinal and playing like middle linebacker next year, and then being an edge rusher, because that's what they do. They draft linebackers, then make them edge rushers for no real reason half the time. But anyway, I think that's kind of where I'm at with him. So your number 6 you already gave, which was Donovan, right, as Rock.
Yeah,
was your number 6. So my number 6, and this guy I had way higher than I thought I was going to have, Josiah Stewart out of Michigan. What an absolute menace as a smaller, like this dude. If you told me, just like if you showed me just him on the field and how he was moving, I'd be like, who would put like a true like coverage linebacker athlete at edge and just told him to run after guys? Like, who did that? And then I'm like, oh, it's because it's basically a linebacker-sized player just absolutely screaming off the edge of Michigan's defense every snap. He is so, like, to me, and you will know exactly what I'm talking about here, Jake, but he gave me major, now I'm losing my place where I was thinking, Herbig vibes for the Steelers. Nick Herbig. Major Nick Herbig vibes. A sawed-off, like 6'2", 6'1", 240-pound edge. No arm length really to speak of, like sub-32-inch arms. Doesn't matter because he's faster than you, he's quicker than you, and he has more power than you know what to do with at his size. Like when he runs into dudes, I did not expect the knockback I was going to get from him whenever I was watching. I'm like, what is going? Like listen, speed to power is a real thing. He's got the speed, and he turns it into power sometimes. Now, he's not going to be a great run defender. I think he'll be a splashy run defender, kind of like Herbig's the same way. We're like, not going to set a great edge, but he'll make some splash plays occasionally. He'll stop a guy in the backfield, but this is a guy, if you put him on the field as a designated pass rusher, you're going to see results, I think, from this guy. Like, I think he's legitimately going to be part of a great pass rush if he goes to the right team. So that's why I have him at 6. I think he's just too juiced up, too explosive, too fun to watch as an edge rusher for him not to be productive at the next level. So,
yeah, he was an honorable mention for me.
And I get it because he's just a weird build. Again,
it just scares me.
Yeah, I get it. I get it.
There's just too many things about
the profile.
I don't think he's great with his hands. I think he could be better. He doesn't have the best bend, as you kind of said, stiff. And he can't really extend on linemen. So those things make me weary, but with that said, I mean, he was one of the more productive pass rushers in the nation.
Especially on a snap-by-snap basis, yeah.
I think he had like 30 sacks in college or 25 or something like that. I don't
Very productive player.
Yeah. I remember seeing a stat where he had somewhere like 30 career sacks or something like that. So he is productive. So I'm just scared about how he develops in the NFL. He doesn't have the size or the length, and I feel bad because that's not something that he can control, and he is a menace. So I want to give him his respect because he plays his heart out. Like I respect that.
Yeah.
I'm just a little worried that there's just too many things I think that he needs to work on, and I don't know with his stature that he can be too productive without working on those.
Mm-hmm.
But I love the tenacity that he plays with. Like he is a fun guy to watch. He's a fun guy to watch.
If there's any player, if there's any player in this class that's going to burn me for ranking him where I have him, this is the guy. But if I'm going to bank on somebody, it's like if I'm going to bank on somebody, it's a guy like this that I'm like, I know if he fails, it has nothing to do with his willingness to just be an absolute disaster for offenses. Like, he's going to go out there and run through everybody he can, and if he can't do it, so be it. But he's going to try, and he's going to try to get around the edge as fast as he possibly can and destroy quarterbacks. And if he can do it, it's going to be awesome to watch. And if he can't, he probably won't play very long. That's the problem.
Yeah.
So putting him at 6 is really like kind of leaving myself out the drive potentially, but that's what you got to do sometimes. If you like a guy enough, you got to throw him out there. I'm sure Dalton would have him 50th among edge rushers because if you guys haven't seen this yet potentially, but Dalton and I always have one guy where I'm like, this guy's the worst player I've ever seen. Dalton, so he's my like third best player at this position. Very funny. It's normally not that bad, but it's kind of that bad sometimes. But anyway, so that was my number 6 guy. We've taken care of our number 5 guys already. I had scored, and I think you had Michael Williams at 5, right?
Yeah.
So we're on to number 4, and I'll let you kick things off at 4 here.
4, I have James Pierce Jr.
Okay, so he's my number 2. I wish he wasn't, kind of, because apparently he sucks a little bit. Is the going story is that he's kind of an asshole. But hey, sometimes you're an asshole. Yeah. We're called the Generous Sports Network.
I think Crash Out was the specific.
Yeah, Crash Out. Whatever term you want to use. He just basically apparently
whatever the kids are saying nowadays.
Whatever they're saying. Which honestly, don't tell us if you know what it is. I don't want to know what it is. So don't worry about it. But no, tell us about James Pierce here out of Tennessee.
There's a lot of things that I like about him, which I'm going to say about everybody from this point on because
if we're in our top 4, we're pretty happy with all these guys.
Yeah, he's got good height and length. He's athletic for his size. He moves pretty well. Gets off the line of scrimmage pretty well, and he's very fast around the edge. Mm-hmm. Turns speed to power well. He can change direction fast. He's very agile. All of those tools make me very excited about him at the NFL level. In terms of run defense, there's definitely some work, and that's why he's 4 for me. I don't think it's that much, but he's able to turn speed to power when he's rushing the passer. But I don't, at least for me, I didn't feel like I saw the same strength in run defense. And he doesn't have the best instincts there, but he has the skill set to be a good run defender. I think. He can use his hands better, but I think that's something that can be learned. And there were a couple times. This is maybe a little bit of a nitpick, but there were a couple times that I kind of saw him be able to get into the backfield against the run, and then he just misses, like he's not able to break down.
Yeah, he has some trouble finishing plays sometimes. Yeah.
Something that can be worked on. So there's no like major concerns for me. The run defense is something I would like to come along for him, and I think that's why he's a little bit lower for me. But he has all the tools to be a great NFL player. Yeah,
he's number 2 for me ultimately because I'm a huge fan of Brian Burns, and he screams Brian Burns to me. Like, just like basically blaring with a bullhorn. Like, this is Brian Burns potentially. And if you can tell me I can get Brian Burns in the draft class, I'm probably taking him pretty damn high. Like, I'm just a very big fan of Burns because when you think of a true, like, speed pass rusher, guy gets around the corner with blazing speed that gets the quarterback quickly, causes havoc. That's who you think of, at least for me, as Brian Burns. Like, because that's that type of like lighter but explosive edge rusher that makes that work. Now, is he going to get pushed around in the run in the ground game sometimes? Absolutely. Is he going to get stuffed sometimes by tackles who can stay with his speed? Yes. But he creates havoc plays consistently because of that speed and that ability to bend the corner. Pierce has that same skill set to me, and I think for someone who likes Burns as much as I do, it'd be disingenuous not to have Pierce in that same kind of category to me because I think they play very similarly. Now, the issue with him ultimately is, does he kind of suck? And not as a player, but just as a person. I don't know enough about that to know if I care that much. Now, he did say some funny shit during the Combine week, like he forgot his shirt at the freaking hotel, so he had to wear the hoodie when he ran his 40. And then he ran it faster than anyone else pretty much did at the college, at least for his size. Like, he's just a weird player. And then he said something about like he's built. He's built different. He said something that was funny. Point is, I don't know what kind of person he is. He might just be kind of a weirdo, like a George Pickens type that isn't bad, just weird, whatever. but he's damn good on the football field, and he deserves to go very high in this class off his talents, if nothing else. So, but I get having him a little bit behind some of these other guys. Very close to me with some other players. So, my number 4 though, Mike Green out of Marshall. Now, he's a really good pass rusher, but there's 2 key things with him that I think kind of kept me from putting him higher than this. The number one thing, just on a personal level, I don't know how I feel about his past, and I don't want to get into the details of it too much because I don't know all the specifics. But it's hard not to knock a guy a little bit when you have to worry about that type of stuff, especially with what we've seen with the likes of we'll just fine Deshaun Watson. I'll say his name. We don't want that situation. We don't want now Justin Tucker of all people, which that's still weird to me. I don't know how to deal with that, but whatever. It's not great. It's not a great look.
It's the AFC North, man.
Yeah, listen, get out of the AFC North.
Same division.
Yeah, get out of the AFC North if you can. It's a wild place. Don't now the Bengals are like, what's defense? We don't know what that is. Anyway. So that's part of it. And then also I do think that he might be best. Not that he isn't a good run defender right now, but I think at a high level of competition at the NFL level, I wonder if he's going to be able to play the run well enough to play 80, 90% of the snaps, or is he going to be best used as a true fire breather off the edge type of pass rusher, designated pass rusher type. And now that doesn't mean you can't take him high in the draft to be that, because I think he's that good at doing that stuff. But I do think that kind of brings him down a little bit, because I think even Pierce does have more functional plays against the run than him, especially at a high level of competition in the SEC. I see more of that stuff with him where I'm not super worried that he can't be on the field a lot of the time. So that's kind of ultimately the book on him for me.
Yeah, he comes in at number 3 for me.
Gotcha.
I do think he'll need to add some strength.
Probably. And his frame is already a little maxed out to me, I think.
Yeah.
It's kind of because he's a shorter, stockier edge but yeah.
Yeah. I think he could extend a little better with the upper body, but that's another thing, just kind of with his frame. I think he could be more disciplined in terms of staying in his gap in the run. And sometimes, a few times actually, I would see him tackle and leave his feet. And I would be like, I don't know why he left his feet there. I think it's just a bad habit.
Probably, yeah.
But with that said, very productive rushing the passer in college. Very, very productive. He got back there. He's a good athlete, gets off the line of scrimmage. I feel like a lot of players at this position that I watch are either really quick off the ball and they have good bend and they're fast around the edge. And if they don't have that, then they're able to, set up their moves better to kind of make up for that. I think he does both. So I think, he's got a sky-high ceiling when it comes to rushing the passer in the NFL.
Absolutely.
He understands how to set his moves up. He has several moves that he could win consistently with. He's physical and he's explosive. I mean, that's the best possible package of skills you could have. I'm looking at potential as a pass rusher.
Yeah.
And a relentless motor. He does not give up.
Sometimes to the point where it's dude, you might need to take a breather or something. Jesus, relax for a second, but also kind of keep doing it maybe.
Yeah. The personal stuff, we'll just have to see. We
don't know enough about that. We don't know the details, but it's anytime that type of thing is mentioned, it's just jeez. All right, you're taking a risk there. So.
Yeah, but very good pass rusher. Very, very, probably the most excited I am about a player in this class, just in terms of specifically pass rushing.
Yeah, which fair enough. Yeah. So my number 3 then, since he was your number 3, Shamar Stewart out of Texas A&M, which is he your number 2 then?
Yeah.
Jake, okay, I figured. So we'll talk about him together here for a second, so we can get to our number 1, which I expected to be the same player. I'd have been okay, let's not get too crazy. No, Shamar Stewart number 3 for me, number 2 for Jake here. I think the hype on him of being a top 10 pick I think it's justifiable, because you look at like people like him tend to be overblown in terms of how athletic they are and like how special of an athlete they are. They tend to be drafted a little bit higher than maybe they should because they don't have the actual ability on the field yet. They don't have the production, which he doesn't have the production. But when you watch the tape, it translates, man. He looks like the athlete people like. There's a reason people thought he was going to test the way he did. And I know he brought his weight down a lot. Like we'll see what he plays at weight wise, but I mean, you want to talk about speed to power, and you want to talk about the ability to just absolutely knock back guys in the run and pass game. It's hard to find a better example of that if you're trying to put teach tape out than what Shamar Stewart does to tackle sometimes in the SEC. Now, it's not consistent. He definitely has room to grow. He has a lot of things he has to work on still. That's why he's ultimately 3 for me and not 2 or even 1. But you just don't see guys built like this often. Like this is a true like unique athlete that has shown enough to me, despite the lack of overall production in terms of sacks and things like that, especially where I think at the NFL level on a team that asks him to just pin his ears back a lot of the time, the production will come. Like he's just too athletic, too already good as a bull rusher and that type of player. Like I could see a very similar rookie season to like a Jared Verse, even though he's not quite as, ready to go as I think a Jared Verse was last year, but that same just power profile as a player is really hard for any tackle to deal with. So
Yeah. His potential, I would take him very high in this draft, but I do worry that he's a guy to me that I think is going to take a couple of years to put it all together.
Very possible.
So I worry that, not comparing him in terms of skill set to Tyree Wilson, but I think that could be an example of a player who's going to take a while to get it. I mean, like Tyree Wilson in the Raiders fan base, until the last like 5 games of 2024, is just getting slandered weekly. And I worry that if a team takes a player like Shamar Stewart too high, and it takes him a year or 2 to put together, I just don't want him to get that bust label. Because I feel like he's going to get taken high and just not be as successful as some other in their first year. But he has all the tools, I think, to blossom into a very good edge rusher. He's got good size. He's got length. He's strong, especially at the point of attack. He's got good body strength. Turns speed to power well. He can change direction quickly. He's got to figure it out with his hands.
Yeah, that's the one. That's certainly part of that developmental track that you have to. Like part of probably why he didn't have the production he could have is a lot to do with the little things of rushing the passer, the finding some more counter moves, using his hands well to deconstruct blocks and get off blocks faster. Like all that stuff is stuff that you have to teach him at the next level more and ask him to do more of. But I think there's nothing limiting him physically from doing those things, right?
Yeah, I have no doubt that he can do that.
Exactly.
I think it's just going to take him a bit. I think the one thing that I would say I'm the most concerned about with him is he looks a little stiff sometimes in his lower body, especially when he's coming around the edge. I don't know that that's something that can be like fixed at the NFL, so that might be a drawback. But that's really the only concern that he has that I don't think can be improved in the NFL. So if he was closer to reaching like his skill set, like his full potential, he'd be above Carter. I think he can develop into a better.
He has more. He has a better physical profile overall, like in terms of size and strength and stuff like that, for sure.
Yeah.
But he's for me at the end of the day, like this is the type of player you bank on in the middle to like especially like the middle of the first round. Like there's players that are going to be better players than him right this minute that you could draft, but everyone after pick like especially like 10, you're not going to find a better potential player than him, especially. And I think in the first round, obviously, you need to go after guys who can become one of the best players their position if you can get them. And Stewart at least has that in him physically. Now, I think the thing you worry about, I think I compare him more to a Trayvon Walker, where you don't want to take a guy like this number 1 if there's another player that's just simply better than him right now and has comparable physicals, like an Abdul Carter that we'll talk about in a minute. But he could become the best player, but there's just no guarantee of that compared to a guy that just has more translatable skills right now and is more developed in that way. So, it's kind of that same conversation of like, well, Stewart's not as good of a pass rusher as some of these guys, but look what he could become. But if it takes 3 years, maybe you don't end up getting the return on investment you want, or you have to pay him for production he hasn't had yet, or whatever. So we'll see what happens with him. I think a good spot, if you're going to take him very high, would be the Panthers, because specifically at 8, because you have Jadeveon Clowney, who's a more comparable player than that to him physically. Like, he's figured it out over time in the NFL and like used that athleticism to his fullest. So maybe he'd be a good mentor for him. They need the pass rush juice. He'd get a lot of playing time early on to kind of work through stuff. Like, that's kind of where I'm penciling him at in terms of, if you're going to have to take him in the top 10, take him there. But there's a lot of teams he would fit with. But it's just, I hope he goes to a place that he gets the chance to play kind of free, figure stuff out, and we'll see what he can become. So, but that leaves our final player. No surprises here. Yeah, I'm sure that if Dalton was here with us right now, he would be don't want to make it sound like he's dead or anything. But if he was on the show right now, he,
it's
of
like
course,
he's with us.
It's like I can hear him right now yelling at me to have Abdul Carter one. Abdul Carter out of Penn State is the number 1 edge rusher, and for some people, they've already said, is their number 1 player, period. I'm not quite ready to say that yet. I've not gone through all my evaluations, but he's at least going to be 2, if not 1. Let me just put it that way. I'll kind of let you kick things off, Jake. What do you like about maybe the best player in the class?
There's a lot.
Yeah.
I'll start with he's a good athlete, and probably the most encouraging thing for me is that I still think he has a lot of room to grow as a pass rusher.
Yes.
He's quick off the line. He's fast around the edge. He can change direction quickly. He knows how to use his hands. He's aggressive, or he shows aggression. He's physical, and he can cover a little bit if needed too.
Yes.
So that's another thing. That's just a.
Just played off-ball linebacker for 2 years before this, and then was one of the best players at edge in the country in his first year doing it. Nothing too crazy there.
The most exciting part for me is, watching him on the tape. You can obviously see how good he is, but he's still raw to me. I think he can use his hands like better than he does now. I think there's room for growth there. I think specifically against the run, he can improve. I'm just spitting gibberish these last 30 seconds. I don't know what's going on.
Yeah, you're good. We get the
But I just think he could have better instincts there in terms of like recognizing blocks, and maybe be a little stronger against the run. But there's just so many things to like, and I also am not ready to say he's the number 1 pick yet, but I don't think there's any chance that he makes it out of the top 3. Like, I can't really see a world where that happens. So, yeah.
Well, I see one world where that happens, but it's a really sad world to be.
Maybe if we're on like a PFF mock draft or something.
Well, I was thinking specifically if the Titans take Cam Ward at 1, the Browns decide to go with Travis Hunter, and the Giants are basically told, if you don't draft a quarterback, you're not going to be in the organization anymore, and it ends up being Shadur Sanders, then Abdul Carter could be the 4th pick. But I don't necessarily expect that to happen. We'll see kind of how the rest of the quarterback dominoes fall. But outside of that, I don't see him falling outside of the top 3. Just to kind of piggyback off what you said, this is a guy who played off-ball linebacker for the first 2 years of his career, despite the fact it was pretty well established that the thing he was best at doing was flying in the face of the quarterback. Right?
Oh, wait.
Yeah, and there's someone else who played at that school who also ended up doing that, just at the NFL level, in Michael Parsons. Now, I want to be very clear, I'm not saying that Abdul Carter is Michael Parsons. But if you squinted and you just watched him play, you might be able to tell, or you might not be able to tell them apart. Which, that's all I need to know, that he's the number 1 edge rusher in the class. Yeah. No, not really. But the point is, a guy like this who has a really strong build, that's still a shorter build a little bit, 6'3", about 250, that has the raw power that he still has at that size, that has the blinding speed to the corner. Like, this is a guy, you like quick winning edge rushers, you like guys who get to the quarterback in 2 seconds. That's who Abdul Carter is. Like, that's what his bread and butter is. If he gets the corner on a tackle, he flattens the edge and absolutely obliterates angles, just destroys quarterbacks when he gets a chance to. Like, in his pursuit speed, good luck. Like, unless you're like Lamar Jackson and someone of that, like, you're not outrunning this dude to the corner. Like,
Yeah.
you simply aren't. If he has a beat on you, it's over. Sorry. Like, there's like 4 guys playing quarterback that I think are legitimately going to be able to get away from him if he has the right angle on them. And you obviously aren't playing them every week, right? So it's going to be tough to evade this guy in the open field, especially. And again, he has linebacker skills. Like, he was a true off-ball linebacker for a couple of years. This is what I mean with like Jalen Walker. Like, if he would have played one or the other like a full time at any point, I might feel better about him. But he didn't really do that. So now I have to be like, well, Abdul Carter technically is that, but he actually played both positions full time. So I can't say that I don't know the answer to that, right?
Yeah.
He, because of his movement skills, like, he'll probably do the TJ Watt thing where he'll get like 7 interceptions or something in his career because he'll just like drop into zone sometimes and just take the ball away because quarterbacks aren't expecting him to be there and stuff like that. And that's a cool little added bonus. Like, just everything about him just feels like a slam dunk. Like, I need a number 1 edge rusher. I have a top 3 pick. There we go.
It's fun when the best edge rusher in the class can cover too.
It's just fun. Yeah, it's like cool. It's like, hey, that's pretty cool. Like, oh, you can run faster than the tight end and some of the running backs. That's weird, but cool. Like that, like that's just you love to see that if you can get it. But yeah, his run defense does need to improve a little bit in terms of point of attack. But he's a smaller guy compared to some other edge rushers. He's not as well built. He hasn't played the position long enough to really get up to that kind of strength point. But good luck running away from him, though. If you don't block him, yeah, don't do that. Don't do the TJ Watt thing. Speaking of like TJ Watt and the coverage thing, don't do the TJ Watt thing with him where you just don't cover him and then he destroys your run play from. But like, I'm still trying to figure out why teams do that against edge rushers that do that. They're able to pursue at the speed they can because you're just going to end up getting the play blown up on the other side. Like, he's still going to just make the tackle anyway. So yeah, he's a very fun player. Expecting him to go super high and. Outside of the foot injury thing, which apparently isn't even that big of a deal, I think he might still test or something at the pro day.
Yeah.
That's the only thing I can see hurting him a little bit, but I don't think anyone's going to care.
Yeah.
Just don't. Yeah. So
I don't either.
Yeah, especially considering like the rest of the edge rushers, there's really good ones. I don't think any of them compare to what Carter currently is. So that's kind of what it comes down to. But that'll do it for us this week, folks. Our first episode on the new channel here at Degenerate Sports Network. We're excited to bring you this show every week. We'll be doing stuff all the way up to the draft and after, potentially as well, for a while. It might take a little bit of a break for everybody to chill, but probably going to get into some summer rankings. That'll be fun, kind of see what's next up in the class. We'll see what we can find there. And then this Wednesday coming up and Wednesdays moving forward, we have our betting show Over the Line. Definitely check that out. It's going to be our Merch Madness episode next week. Always fun. Try to make sure we get everybody on for that. I know, Jake, you already mentioned to me pre-show you might have to miss that, which would be unfortunate, but that would keep with the theme of someone missing, unfortunately, the first episode. But hopefully you're able to make it. If not, we'll have plenty to talk about this on Wednesday at 9:30 Eastern time. So any final thoughts you want to throw out there about the edge or linebacker class here?
Edge was a lot more fun than the linebackers.
Yeah.
That's probably my biggest takeaway. I had a lot of fun watching this class, top to bottom. I mean, you go from Abdul Carter all the way down to a guy like David Walker.
Yeah,
I had fun watching all of them. So
yeah, all fun play. Edge rushers are usually fun to watch, kind of no matter what. So definitely fun. But like I said, that'll do it for us this week.